What's going on, family? Dustin here. Very excited for today's episode. I was sitting around, browsing around on my phone, like many of us do, when all of a sudden I came across this article last week, and it was talking about the loneliness epidemic of dads, specifically stay-at-home dads, but dads in general. And I read it, ate it up immediately, and it hit on so many important things about how dads are perceived in the world, how dads act in the world, how we reach out or don't reach out in the world. And it really just struck me on many chords. And the minute I finished reading, I'm like, dude, I got to find out who this guy is, find out more about him, tell him thank you for writing this article. And so that's what I did. Found him on Instagram, sent him a message right away, just tell him thank you so much. Amazing guy. Messaged me back like a day later and very apologetic too. He apologized. Oh, sorry, like I didn't mean to wait so long to respond. Like sometimes I forget to check Instagram. And the fact that you even say anything, I was just letting you know, thank you. But he's like, what can I do for you? Or let me know if there's anything else I could do for you. I'm like, well, I'm kind of relaunching my podcast, if you don't mind being on. And here we are a week later, less than a week later. And he was gracious enough to come on my podcast. His name is Shannon Carpenter. He is a humor writer who learned from the famous Second City, and he's written amazing articles, wrote an incredible book, The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad, manual for staying at home, your essential manual for being an awesome full-time father, which I've just been diving into and just eating up as well, as just like his article. And he's also done many interviews, has a podcast of his own with 4 friends, and really just has become quickly like a mentor and inspiration for me. And I just really was excited that he agreed to come on. And so we're going to get to hear a lot about his experience, how he came to be at Stay Home Dad, some of the troubles that we're facing, some where he's going with his work that he's doing, and really just a great all-around guy. And was a fantastic interview, a lot of fun. And make sure you check out the show notes so you can find him and the House Dad podcast as well, or Dad House Pod, and get more information about him there. But just great interview. Enjoy. Let me know what you think. Always give us a follow, like, subscribe, and please help me out. Leave a review as well. So there you go. Enjoy my interview with Shannon Carpenter. What's up, family? Dustin here with another episode of Family by Heart podcast. I am super, super excited for today's guest. It is Mr. Shannon Carpenter. He is a humor writer, author, speaker, podcaster, and winner of 2023 Al Watts Alumni Award. And most importantly to me and his family, he's a stay-at-home dad. Shannon, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. Love it.
Dude, I'm so psyched to have you on. Like, I haven't been this excited for one of my guests in a while, and incredibly enough, I'm this excited when I just discovered you last week. So I don't think it's just because you're new to me. I think it's really this whole movement that I had no idea was really even going on, and we're definitely going to dive into that.
Yep.
But I've only, as I just said, I've only recently discovered you myself, but you've been doing interviews and writing for some time, basically since 2008.
Yeah.
About the whole at-home dad thing. But what's something that surprising about you that maybe your writers or listeners, other people would know about you aside from your circle of friends and your family? It's something surprising that your writers and followers wouldn't really know about you.
You know what? This is a good one. So, yeah, I've been writing about fatherhood for a long time. It's, but when I write better when my family and kids are around. So, like, when the chaos is happening, I know writers are supposed to be in this, like, quiet place. I'm the exact opposite, man. And I think it's just because I had to train my way to be that, because when the kids were like 2 and 3 and 4 years old, you're always moving and everything's always loud. So my best creative moments come when everyone's screaming. It is weird. Even I think it's weird. So like even now when the kids are in school, I do some of my best writing at the library during story time, and everyone's loud there, and I can just sit back and be part of the world. So yeah, that's my interesting fact about myself.
Yeah, and I think I remember seeing you in your book, which we'll definitely talk about, that you did some of your writing at like some of the kids' baseball games and
Oh
stuff like
yeah,
that too. Like you're just being there and
I write so much in stands, volleyball stands, gyms, soccer fields. It's those moments. Some days you're gone on kids' activities so much, but really what you're just doing is just watching and hanging out. And so yeah, I would have a notebook with me, and I'd get some writing done while I see my kids sitting on the sideline. So yeah, it's a nice place.
Did your kids ever give you shit? They're like, Dad, you're not watching. You're writing. Why aren't you watching me play?
No, they didn't. Mostly because I tell them to pay attention to what they're doing. No, because I'm there every day, all the time. Like I don't miss things. So I think they get tired of me at times. Like go away, Dad. I'm like, no, I'm going to support you. Shut up.
Oh, my 4-year-old already has down the Dad. I'm like, am I embarrassing you that much already at 4? Like,
yeah.
I'm kind of proud of it, actually. It's like a badge of honor for me.
I was just waiting for you to flip it, and you're like,
So, like I said, you've done a lot for dads out there, but how did you and your wife come to the decision of you being a stay-at-home dad? Because you were doing fairly important work beforehand as an investigator, and was that work you were doing before part of the decision? Did you need to take a step away from that because it was so serious? And maybe it was kind of giving you, making you feel a little bit jaded about the world and stuff. So how was the decision process for you guys, for you to be stay-at-home dad?
That question has evolved over time, believe it or not. My stock answer is I wanted to be there for my kids. We were in a rut. You get up every day, you go to work, you drop the kids off at daycare, you come home. You drop them off at 7, you pick them up at 7 at night, right? And you're really not having any time with them. And I felt like that was a rut for my wife and I. And so I said someone should stay home. And then I joked that it should be me. And then I looked at it and was like, oh God, it should be me, right? And my wife's career track, she works in advertising, was higher than mine at the time. So I was an elder abuse investigator, investigating abuse of the aged and disabled. And, it's an important job, and I loved what I did. And so that was how we made the decision. Once we kicked off any kind of gender identity norm stuff, like mom stays home, dad always goes to work, right? Even when I said it, it didn't click to me until I started really considering that it would be me. Now, with that said, over the years, what I've really learned to come to think is, maybe it's better to phrase why I still do it. So here's what I tell dads. If you stay home with the kids, you don't have to make it 10 years, 15 years, 2 years, 5 years, anything like that. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. You can do it for 6 months. You can quit anytime. But the reason why I stayed with the kids is because I wanted to give them those core memories and that core base that I think is important. And we're lucky enough that I get to do it. I've also decided that staying home with the kids can be a luxury. It's a class luxury. It's expensive, and yes, we make sacrifices for it, but I stay doing this because they still need me, and I still want to give them those core foundations, because one day in life they'll need it. I'm actually I have another book I'm writing right now. That's kind of what the main point of it is. It's interesting to me.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I could definitely understand what you're saying there about wanting to have more of a handprint on their upbringing.
Yes.
For us, even with our 2 boys, again, they're adopted, fostered them first, and once we adopted them, the assistance we got for daycare from the county went away. So all of a sudden, we've been spending money for daycare ourselves, and it's ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
So not only that, but post-pandemic, we were seeing they were having a hard time keeping employees at the daycare that we had them at, and so things were kind of not as peak as they were when the kids first went in there. And what, it's an opportunity for me to be at home with the kids. I was working a job. I wasn't working in a career at the time, whereas my wife was opposite. She was a career, and it just made more sense for me to stay home with the boys. We watch our budget a little bit more
Yeah.
versus us both work and one of us have to get a second job just to pay for daycare. It just
Yeah.
made more sense.
I think that's one of the big problems that we're all facing is that the cost of childcare. And it was tough when I looked at it 15 years ago because we had my daughter in daycare at the time. It's insane. I don't know any other way to do it. That it felt like I was working for 90% of my income to go to have someone else care for my child. And I was like, what's the point of that? That's kind of where my head was at.
And that's what it was for us too, because I was working as a painter at the time for painting apartments and homes. And I was lucky for the year I did that. I was about 8 months of it. I was at this real nice high-end apartment building downtown Cleveland. But the other months I was in more lower income projects, like area that like I just didn't feel comfortable in. And they were kind of triggering for me, like knowing that my boys' biological mom lived not too far from that area. And that it's like, okay, like, and this is what she would have had them in. Like it was pretty triggering for me. So definitely felt better being there, being hands-on. Your book, which we'll get into, covers some of the reactions you get from the outside world about being a stay-at-home dad. But how did your immediate family react, and what was your relationship with your dad like growing up, and was that a factor in you being a stay-at-home dad as well?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. I don't get asked that question that often. And the book I'm writing now, actually, that's the actual book. You know, I spend a lot of time thinking the decisions that we make as fathers, how do they affect your children without you knowing it 30 years down the line, right? And that's kind of where it comes with my dad. My own dad, you know, was very close to my father. But since the age of 5, he had multiple sclerosis, right? He was in a wheelchair. And so eventually I spent most of my time with him growing up as he had to stop work. And I realized, oh, he was a stay-at-home dad. There wasn't really a term for it as much back then, back in the 80s. Now, when it came time for me to make the decision I was making, right, and I grew up in the South, right, so this very old-timey masculinity, you know, macho tough guy thing, right, that a lot of us deal with, right, like you just always have to be tough. You always have to be strong. And that's the way it was for me. But when I decided to stay home with my kids, my dad said, good. Like there was never a debate with him. He was like, you'll never regret a day with it. And my grandfather, who was the second toughest guy I know besides my father, right? Grandfather, World War II vet, was in the Pacific, right? Just gnarly tough guy. He's like, it's a good decision. You know, I like it, bud. So when I had those support of those two men, and I think this is key with a lot of us, you know, they were almost that mentorship into fatherhood, right? And if they respected me and they thought I should do it, and they never gave me anything but cheerleading, it was an easy decision from that standpoint. And so, yeah, I didn't get a whole lot of crap from it. I think my brother at times was like, you know, but then he came around because he had kids and they had gotten older. And what I find when I talk to dads, it's not any kind of teasing me for being a stay-at-home dad. It is a little bit of jealousy that they didn't get to spend as much time with the kids as I have. That actually comes out. Like they have a little bit of regret there. And I understand that. So, yeah, that's what the community mostly works. Now, if I post an article online or give an interview, yeah, the comments come pretty hard. So we deal with it.
And then I loved your book came out, a year ago. So I guess Karen was a term at the time when your book came out. But like you had your own descriptions for some of moms you came across. And which that whole part definitely, that had me chuckling out loud and that stuff. So it's a fantastic book. So the book is The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad. Again, I have been, you know, just kind of reading it chunk by chunk. I finally was able to get my hand on it Saturday. And again, I just discovered you last week, so I've been trying to jump a bit.
To get through all this, there's a lot of stuff out there, man. Take your time. You're going to get burned out.
I mean, I've been doing it for a year and a half, and this book is full of tips from like a lot of awesome dads already in the book. And I've already been putting some of those things into place with the kids, like the kids and my wife, like the 4 o'clock cleanup every day. Like try to clean the first 2 rooms that your spouse is going to come into when they get home. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Cause I know like when she's seeing that look on her face, when she comes into the living room, like toys everywhere and stuff. And I'm like, well, we're having fun. Like, what do
Yeah.
you want? But it's still just getting that sense of calm because she's dealing with the chaos all day and on her own. So that was a good one.
Thank you.
But one of the important ones that I probably need to circle back to with my wife that you talked about was creating a job description for anyone
Yes.
that's looking to become a stay-at-home dad. Why do you think that one is so important, creating that job description?
So it's funny when I mention that, and I'm a humor writer because I think that's how you reach dads. Dads don't do sentimental. We're done with that, right? We do humor. That's how you break through the noise to a dad. But when I say that dads need a job description, people laugh like it's a joke. It's not. It's real. I actually have a job description. And what it really does, and it's just a funny way of saying, is communication is important between you and your wife, right? That communication is essential. Knowing exactly what's expected of you and what you expect of them, that will stop 90% of the fights. And those are things that I had to live through to understand. What is my wife's name, Erin? What did she want done? What was important to her? What was important to me? What jobs would she take in the parenting world off my head? How would she share that mental load? What'd she expect of me? Was my job primarily to cook and clean, or was my job to raise the children? Those are two separate things, right? And that means we both decide my job was to raise the children, which means sometimes she's going to come home and the house is going to be a wreck because we had adventures. We were doing stuff.
Right.
And so that job description is why I tell people to do it. What I really mean is to communicate specifically what you're responsible for, what she's responsible for. And even now, I've been with my wife, oh God, close to 30 years now, right? Married for like 23, 22. I don't know. It's long enough that I'm forgetting. And if she hears that, she's going to yell at me. But, I've been with her long enough to know what sets her off and what doesn't. And she knows the same for me. So even now I ask her when she goes to work, is there 3 things this week that have been bothering you that you want me to take care of? And she'll tell me. It could be something small like wash the dog food bowl to could you go down to the pharmacist and deal with this guy? And then I get to do the same thing with her. These are 3 things that are bothering me. So that way we actually share the load of parenting, a load of life. That's really what it is. When you walk this burden by yourself, it's hard. You need to share it. So that's what the job description does.
No, I love that. And like I said, it's one I definitely think my wife and I would benefit from revisiting that one. You also stress the importance when it comes to sharing the family experience with your spouse. The importance of the weekends being family time so that the one is working the job, I mean, both are jobs, I'll be honest with that, but they have time with the kids to develop and nurture their relationship with the kids. What kind of struggles did you and your wife face when it came to how the kids responded to her since you were with them the majority of the time? And as guys, we're normally fixers, and so we like to step on and fix it. And that's something I struggle with sometimes, trying to let my wife, okay, she's handling that, and I hear the kids, now 2 toddlers, here they're not responding to her the way I would want them to. So I step in. So how did you step in, or did you step back and let her handle it in those moments?
That takes some time because that is so I tell moms the same thing, right? I tell moms to step away, let dads parent the way they need to parent, like their natural abilities. And we're just on the other side of that because we're stay-at-home parents, right? And so I got advice from a mom that, she was like, nope, don't interfere with husband. Let him figure it out and let him build that bond. But it's hard to do, right? It is very hard to do when things are going to crap for him. Because in my world, when I'm home, there's a routine, there's an expectation with the kids, especially when they were younger. And then you have the dad voice, and what we learned, my wife and I, that it was important for me to shut my pie hole and just back out, right? Even if she really did need help with something, I would be hesitant to get in there unless she called me, because she has to figure it out on her own. I had kids with this woman. I trust her completely, right?
Right.
Now, as they got older, if they're being smart mouth with a kid or with my wife or something like that, yes, I'll pull them aside and be like, okay, we don't treat adults and your mother like that. That's not going to work. But luckily, I haven't had that much of a problem. There's been a couple times where I had to go full dad on them when they treated their mom differently than they would have treated me. But yeah, for the most part, it's like figure it out because they'll get there. And even if you have a mom listening to this, I say the same thing with a dad who's not the primary caregiver as much. Don't rescue. just sit back, let it happen.
All right. Yep. No, that's good, and that's again, like you said, it's the person that you married, so you trust that person, but at the same time, you married them and you want to defend them because it's you and wife first, and then kids. So so that's a hard line I have sometimes. Like trying not to cross. Like no, okay, sit back, let her handle it, But thankfully, her and I work together really well as a team and balance each other out, especially when one of us is like tapping out. Like you could tell they're up. Yeah. You need to step in or else, the kids will be pulled. Not really, but
that's a good way to put it. You tap out. And my wife and I do it where we actually slap hands, like you're up, and I'm like, okay. And especially when they're younger. Now, again, I have older kids now, but when they were toddler age, that's exactly what I was like. I need to walk away. And I'm like, all right, I got it,
Absolutely. Now, aside from info and tips from a lot of other dads, you had a specific group of 4 guys that were part of your book, and you guys have a podcast together. What can you tell us about that Dad House Pod and how you met these guys and your adventures on the podcast?
So, it really comes down. So, an article that I wrote recently was about male fatherhood loneliness, right? Loneliness within this loneliness epidemic, and I experienced that when I first became an at-home dad because it was just me. I couldn't get into a mom's group. Parenting groups themselves didn't really exist that time. I got a lot of thanks, no thanks. You go to the story time and everyone doesn't sit next to you. It's like a little moat. I could sit in the middle of those places and just spread out all I wanted because no one would sit with me. And this is not a shot at moms at all, right? I understand why. And I'm a big dude and a big beard and I get that. But it's very lonely. And my wife told me, she says, you need to find friends. And I'm like, I'm trying. And luckily enough, one day she came home with a website back in 2008 called KC Dads. And that was a dad's group. And there wasn't very many of them at the time. And that's where I met my people. And so I met 4 of the guys, and there's 5 of us total. We all joined at the same time. All of our kids were the same age. And we also actually pretty much have all the same number of kids. There's 2 of them that got 4. But it was just, I guess it was luck. I don't know what it is, but we were all desperate. We were all lonely. And then we all clicked so well. So I've raised 16 kids with these guys over 15 years. They're still my best friends. They're like all my emergency contacts for my kids, right? We vacation together. The lives are close, and having that kind of group has been my lifesaver. It is essential, right? And that's how I got involved into these bigger matters through them.
Yep. And that's, again, you just brought up the article, which is how I found you. Yeah. I came across the article and it just spoke to me immediately, and sent it to one of my other good friends who is also a at-home dad. And he's like, oh, I just read that article too. And we got together that Friday and talked about the article and just talked about being a dad. And we're like, okay, we got to do something like this at least once a month. We're like, okay. And our wives said like, yeah, absolutely. You got to do it. So we're like, okay, we're on the right track there. Yeah. And you guys, the KC Dads was awesome. We found that. And then there's a whole dad conference that I had no idea even existed. And again, the fact that it was like 26 years old now, apparently. Yeah. Because again, you guys talked about it in a podcast episode I listened to that's from last year, where apparently I missed this conference last year. I had no idea it existed, but it was here in my home state, Ohio, down in Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, I just missed it, but I had no idea. And then going to the website of it, seeing that there were 2 dad groups that are right in like Northeast Ohio near me. Yeah. However, I was researching it and like both of them seemed to die out during the pandemic. Has been any activity there. So I'm like, well, I guess I need to start one. So
that's it.
What advice do you have for someone looking to start a dad group? And before you go into how they should start a dad group, maybe hit on the importance of that, how you wrote that article, why you wrote that article,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, and why forming a dad group is so important. And I will be sure to make sure I include a link to that article in the show notes, because that I think was so huge, so important. And again, why I'm getting to connect with you now, and I'm so grateful for it.
All right. So I'm going to spew out some books too, because it's all interrelated to me, right?
Sure.
So, you know, as I've grown older and I have my sons, I spend a lot of time obviously on the problems they will face in the future, right? What problems my daughter will face. And I've
Hmm.
told her always, like, you're going to be told no enough. Fuck it, right? I want you to be aggressive, and that's the way I've read it. I've talked to her about it. Is like you get to have agency over your life. And so I do the same thing with my boys, right? It's the same technique. And so I looked into more of the problems that they were having. And I read a book by Dr. Richard Reeves. He's a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institute called Of Boys and Men, who writes about the issues that are facing men. And one of the things I loved about it is he wrote in that book that men can be lonely, men can have issues, men, have all these problems, and they can be separate from women's issues, right? Just
Hmm.
because men have problems doesn't mean that women have problems or one that's bigger than the other. It's true with a lot of women, they're still dealing with the patriarchy, abortion rights, all these things, right? Those can be
Hmm.
true, and so can the male loneliness thing and our lack of connection. And I really like that. So I got deep into the book and I started researching more about this and writing more about everything that comes with it. And
Hmm.
what I saw one day was people were making fun of the male loneliness, right?
Hmm.
On different social media. And I was really upset about that. I was like,
Hmm.
that's crap. I mean, you ask men to be more connected with themselves and more emotionally open and take on more of the emotional load and be vulnerable, right? To be full human beings. And then they do. And then what they see is they're attacked for that vulnerability. And that's the way it's always been. But that made me upset, right? I was like, no, no, no,
Right.
no, no. You can't have it both ways. It doesn't work like that. So the first article I wrote was basically just yelling at that, and then I followed it up with what article everyone knows now is loneliness within fatherhood and how that comes about, and then what you can do to fix it or at least help yourself. And the thing about the article, the thing I'm really humbled about is I've had hundreds of emails of guys opening up to me saying this is what they're experiencing. And I thought it was right. I felt like the article was good. I didn't know how many people it would touch. So
Hmm.
that was just a lot. And then I look at my own life with it, and what I realized was a lot of people don't know the things that the resources available to us because they're not very well advertised. So in the dad world, there's a group called AtHomeDad.org or National At Home Dad Network, right? And they support dads on a national level to get involved in conversations. And they hold this yearly conference that I've been to. I think this was my seventh one. I missed some in the middle, but 2008 I was going. And they also don't know about a place called City Dad Groups, and that's the other part of this coin. And they actually support fathers and dad groups. They actually run like 41 groups in different cities. Um, and so when I wrote that article and able to get those two organizations, it at least gave some help. And then
Hmm.
there's another place called Fathering Together, which is just fathers in general. Because all of us don't care about at home dad or dads. It just doesn't matter. It's just, are you a dad? And the answer is yes. And I'm like, okay. And that's it. Gay dad,
Hmm.
straight dad, trans dad, no one gives a shit. No one cares. Like, your dad,
Right.
you've got issues and we're going to be there. So
Awesome.
we went back up to this last time. And it's a really good place for me. A lot of the classes are, it's for the dad that doesn't have this or is learning something new. And I learned to do hair for my daughter. My buns are fantastic. I can hair bun like a master. I am good at buns, right? But it
That's awesome.
has like practical knowledge, things we want to know. If I'm a dad, I got to know how to do nails and hair. And there was a sewing class this time, but also
Hmm.
there are classes on your relationship. There are classes on how to parent. There are classes um, on mental health, like these even harder topics, right? And I hope when I
Hmm.
go, what I try to do is make myself available to anybody as I'm in these that might have different questions about different things. Because by now, a lot of people have kind of read that book that have come there, and so, it is a very supportive place and you make these lifelong friendships. And I did. I got the Al Watts Award. And the great thing about that is I know Al. Like, I met Al 15 years ago at the first conference I went to. And so I was honored to get that Lifetime Achievement Award because it has his name on it. That's the kind of friendships you make. And so
That's
when I
awesome.
talk about loneliness within the fatherhood world and the things that I've seen, these are the solutions I can help give. But there's more out there. The next thing that happened in
Hmm.
the article, I have all these smaller men's groups and different facets reaching out to me. It's like, oh, I work in Chicago over here. Oh, no, our work is over here in Minneapolis. And I'm going to put together an article listing all those because I thought what really seems to be the problem here is we just aren't advertising them enough. It's hard to advertise. It's hard to market, right? It's hard to get your
Yeah.
word out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it. So that's how that came about.
Yeah. No, and what about, how do you feel as far as men also being a part of the problem? If it's maybe their personal life getting in the way, maybe their ego,
Oh, yeah.
how they were brought up about, no, men don't share feelings. Because last year I messaged a group of guys both within my church and outside my church. There's about 13 guys, about, hey, let's start a men's group of fellowship. Just like, no, we don't have to do a Bible study or anything. Let's just like get together, hang out.
Yeah.
All of them said yes right away. We had one get together. Half the guys showed up. After that, crickets. Like half the guys won't even respond to the text message.
Yes.
And then I had a time like just a couple months ago where sales came up for like through like Live Nation for concerts, $25 to get you in the door. I knew somebody liked this particular band. I was a big fan of the band. I'm like, hey, tickets are on $25. You want to go? You want to go? I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it right now. Like, I'll check it out later on.
Yeah.
I messaged them every week leading up to it. And the night before, so I'm like, so you're not going to the show? I haven't really heard from you. Not going.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I am going. I'm meeting up with some other buddies. Like, we made plans a while ago.
Yeah. Boom.
Like, come on, dude. Like,
yeah.
Like, so what do you think as far as like guys being part of the problem? And
yes,
of like, because I've told my wife countless times, guys suck when it comes to friendship. Like, they do. There are amazing dads and guys out there that do want to have that friendship, but there are the ones that like, how do you distinguish the two and just be able to cut your losses and say like, okay, well, he needs something, I'm there. Otherwise, I'm not putting in that effort anymore.
I think I have a lot of thoughts on this. Something I've experienced myself. So with my own dad's group, I was part of it for so long, like the nuts and bolts of it. I would put out stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to this chocolate museum, right? Sounds great, right? No one would show up, right? And and it was fine, because what I learned is, for something like this, there's consistency, right? Guys will come, they'll drop in and out of your life, because here's the truth of fatherhood that I think goes underreported, that we don't talk about as much. There is a tremendous amount being asked of us at all times from all areas. And you say, are we part of the problem? We are the problem, right? This is a problem that we have, and this is a problem that we created, and this is a problem that we need to fix. No one can fix this for us, which is, a very man answer, man up and take your responsibility. But the truth of it is, too, you have responsibilities with your kids. You have responsibilities maybe with work, responsibilities with your wife, responsibilities where everyone seems to be asking you everything, and you're just tired, right? That another relationship may feel like another set of responsibilities when you just don't want it. You just can't invest that much of yourself. Now that leads to the loneliness in itself, right? Then you don't make time for those relationships, especially those new relationships, because maybe your old ones have died out and people have moved away. You have to make time, but it's hard to get guys to do that, because again, I think everything is being asked of the modern man today. And I don't say that as bad or good. I just say that as a fact. Right. And we have to learn to make room for ourselves, because I just don't think we do. At least not as fathers.
No, absolutely. So between your podcast, your book, your articles, you've covered a lot of important topics, like getting your kids' first phone, youth sports, mental health, gaming. And then again, in the episode about the Cincinnati conference, a couple of guys talked about to the speakers, the dad with a transgender kid. And that sounded moving. I would love to hear the talk and everything. What do you feel has been the biggest or most moving topic you've covered? And what's one topic you've yet to approach that you're either chomping at the bit to cover, or maybe you're a little nervous to touch it?
That's a good one, man. That is a really good question. I like that one. The most moving one, I think, obviously, was men's loneliness, because I've never gotten a response like that that hit so much at home for so many people. So I think that's the moving one, and it's part of this bigger project that I have, right? And the truth of it is, I have the time, because I have, my kids are older now, and I have my perspective on things have changed. And the truth of it is, when I write articles now, I talk to my kids about it a lot, actually. I'm like, what do you think about this?
Mm,
Because I think that's one of the things we make the mistake is we don't ask our kids' opinions on life. And they certainly are living that life. They certainly have opinions. And one of the great things when you do that is they'll take a different perspective than you will. There's a
mhm,
book out there called The Big Beautiful Question. It's about how to ask the right question, right?
mhm,
And that's what I've been focusing on for the last year is trying to find this right question that I want to ask within fatherhood. And it is all intertwined. And I think what I'm chomping at the bit to get to next, there's a couple things. So I'm pitching an article now. I'll tell you now. Is the world ready for primary caregiver men? Is it truly ready? Right? I don't know. And I've been doing this for 15 years. And I don't mean just as at home dads, but I mean nurses, teachers, child care providers. That's what Dr. Reeves suggests that one of the fixes is that we've got to get more men in these caregiver roles so that children and young boys see men as those role models and modeling, right? But is the world
mhm.
ready for that? And I don't know. I don't know if they are or not. It's something I'm thinking a lot about because I get some positive reinforcement, obviously, which is really cool. But I've also taken a lot of flack in the past. I've been told at a parenting conference, there's a writing conference, that men don't want parenting advice, so we're not going to talk about it. And there I am, a dude in the actual audience. I was like, that ain't right. I was like, this is literally what I do. Because I feel that men don't have the support in the parenting world or the caregiving world that they deserve. That's a topic I'm tackling now, and it's all part of
Mhm.
this bigger idea of how do we go from boys who have the world at our fingertips. Um, how do we get them to a point where they can have that same feeling when they're older adults, right? How do we not go into the incel or Andrew Tate or wackadoodle stuff where it's about dominating others instead of living our best life and helping our best life? And that's I think my ultimate question, or at least so far. So it's like 50,000 things. And I'm trying to
Mm,
navigate my way through those to get some answers because I think those are the questions a lot of dads are asking, especially dads of
mhm,
sons, How do I
mhm.
make him a well adjusted, assertive, good kid? I want him to
Yeah.
help the world, not punish it, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. We in our house, my wife was always a big Peyton Manning fan. Her family grew up in Tennessee, and was finally getting her to convert to the Browns. And then the Browns go and give $240 million to a guy with over 24 sexual assault
Yep.
lawsuits against them, and I'm like, I'm done. I put up with the Browns for years and years and plenty of bad decisions,
Yes.
and it's not a very popular decision around here.
Well, how do you
But
look at that? Because your sons see it. How do you look at that as the role model of what they see, and how do we make
exactly,
sense of that? It's hard.
and that's why I'm okay saying that's even more of the reason why I'm like, okay, good time to jump off now because my kids are 3 and 4,
Yeah.
so they're not really understanding that, and I don't want to pull them into this fandom of
Yes.
despair and depression of the Cleveland Browns franchise,
Like that's
only to
punishment
have
enough,
them.
right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But to have them like lean into it, and when you have someone like that leading it, like I want to set my kids up for better role models, better examples
Yes.
than whatever. And there are other amazing players on that team. Uh, that I'm like, dang, it sucks not being able to like really root for them.
Yeah.
Like I can root for them individually, but it's the organization making
It
that
is.
decision. I cannot stand behind that, and
Mhm.
and especially when my kids were a multiracial family, and I know there's going to come a point where people are going to look at my kids and stop seeing them as cute and see them as a threat. And so it's like
Yeah.
that's already something else I'm having to tackle with them or face with them and teach them growing up. And I'm like, I don't need this other part of it being a distraction either.
It is.
So
And you mentioned this. So my son is 16, right? And he looks like his uncle. Dude's like almost 6 foot already at 16, wide shoulders and strong. And he just doesn't realize it yet. And I'm like, okay, we had a talk. It's like, when you get angry now, you know, you have to be careful. Like, that's a thing.
hmm
Like, people may be
hmm
afraid of you, and you have to be aware of that. And I explained, he's like, oh, Dad, you're crazy. I'm like, I am absolutely not crazy, right? Like, I'm a
hmm
bigger dude myself, and I understand what that feeling looks like, and there's a responsibility that comes with that. and teaching our sons that, because to them it almost sounds unbelievable until they reach that point, and then they're like, oh, and you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm right there with you.
And then when it comes to questions for dads, something I just want to share with you real quick that I've come across recently. It's called the 3MIQ. It's the 3 most important questions. I don't know if you've ever heard it from a group called Mind Valley, but the 3 most important questions that you can ask yourself and maybe teach your kids. It's experiences. What experiences do you want to create or have with your family, with yourself, with your life? Growth. How do I want to grow? Where do I want to grow into?
Yeah.
And then contribution. What do I want to contribute to the world and stuff? And it was just amazing, and it gives you such better focus and clarity on what you want to leave for your kids. Like, because what I had you do is like you take 5 minutes, just write down what experiences do you want with your kids. Not money, not things, not objects, but what experiences do you want to create? Then how do you want to grow? What do you want to contribute? And so it's leaving all that out, and you just take 5 minutes for each of those and write down wherever you can, and then sooner or later you come up with a list like, okay, these are things I really want to focus on in my life and build my life around that. And it's really, really awesome. So,
even on that same page, so Dr. Reeves, I asked him some of these bigger questions. I was like, what's the answer? And his solution was so simple. It was fatherhood's the answer. Better stories of fatherhood, better experiences with fatherhood, more involved fathers, making it possible they can do. And you're doing it right there with those 3 questions, right? And even the stories, I'm trying to put positive stories out in the world. And I help them when I can, because that's what people need to see. There's even a web series, if you haven't seen it, called Turf Valley. Go watch Turf Valley. Right. It's a web series about 3 stay-at-home dads that you don't really know they stay home. They're just dads, right? It is hilarious. It is funny, but it's on point, And it goes back to all that kind of thing you're talking about, is
awesome.
Those changing the story of fatherhood really sticks with me. And I think with your 3 questions, I think that's a good way to start doing it. I love that. I've actually wrote that down. Yeah. Well done, man.
Yeah. Thank you. I wish I could take full credit for it, but again, that's from Mind Valley, but awesome stuff.
Well, that's how we share stuff. That's how it works, man.
Absolutely. That's why, again, I'm so glad to be talking to you on this. I've taken a lot of your time. How about a little quick rapid fire to take us home?
Let's go. Rapid fire speed round. I like speed rounds.
All right. Cool. Better game day food, wings or ribs?
Brats.
Brats. Okay.
What's got?
Now, when it comes to wings, so I'll go back to wings. I kind of thought maybe Kansas City you were going to say bones, but we'll go to wings or pork. Bone in or boneless?
Oh, bone in. Like, that is a big thing here in Kansas City. Barbecue's huge. Bone in.
Yep. Marvel or DC?
Marvel. Better storytelling.
Absolutely. Friends or Friends 2, meaning How I Met Your Mother?
Friends, without a doubt, man.
Okay. Awesome. Who is more annoying, Seinfeld or Everybody Loves Raymond?
Everybody Loves Raymond. More annoying. For me.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Man, we're on point here. Which do you hate doing more, crunches or planks?
Planks. Okay. Yeah, definitely for me.
Family vacation, beach or mountains?
Oh, beach, because I need to make my wife happy. But we alternate, actually, because of that reason.
Daylight savings, keep it or lose it?
Lose it. Yeah, that just messes up sleep schedules.
Absolutely. What hurts more, getting hit in the guys down below or having your nose hairs waxed?
I've done both. The boys down below. Yeah, the nose hair wax. When I do TV, I get it waxed by a guy here. He's like a dude barber. Yeah, it hurts, but not like a ball hit.
Okay. Yeah, I heard it on the one podcast episode that you guys talk about it for when you're doing your book tour and everything.
Yeah.
So, and then, who rolls your eyes more, your wife or your kids?
My kids, without a doubt.
The kids.
Yeah.
And then, do you have a go-to, like, dad kind of catchphrase that your kids know that you're going to say all the time and kind of that brings on some eye rolls, or that they're all about it with dad?
No, it's the dad joke. Anyway, for the dad joke every time. But I will tell you this. My daughter's 17. Remember this. She heard this in school this year, and now she's saying D's nuts jokes everywhere. Like, I'm like, She's like, D's nuts, your mom. I'm like, that's your grandmother, honey. And she's like, oh.
Okay.
Like, keep
Well,
pushing,
that brings on another quick rapid question, which is more inappropriate. That's what she said, or D's nuts?
God, my kids have used both. It depends if you're at a funeral or not. You know, D's nuts at a funeral, not good. But that's what she said. Might be good. You know, look what's in the box. Oh, there we go. D's nuts.
Well, you could have taken what's in the box a different way at a funeral as well. So,
yes, you could.
Especially if his name is Richard. You know,
that's right.
And then, give me one good dad joke off the top of the dome. Put you under pressure there.
I got the thing is, got a million of them. So, two cannibals were eating a guy, and they were having the stew and everything. The two cannibals were eating it, and it turned out the clown. It was a clown. They were eating the clown, and a little nose bubbled up. And one cannibal says to the other, looks at him, says, "Does this taste funny to you?" That's my dad joke. I got a million of those, man.
Oh yeah. My wife tells me I'm not allowed to tell dad jokes till my kids are 5, and now I don't listen to that, and they're already telling me like, "Dad, your dad jokes are terrible." Yeah. Like, proud badge I wear.
Yeah, I know. So, some of us make a second career out of it. I'm just saying.
Hey, absolutely. You're doing fantastic at it.
Thank you, man.
Shannon, this was awesome. I appreciate you so much coming on, being a part of the family. Mm-hmm. Where can people find out more about you and actually one more question. Uh-huh. You guys are on a hiatus. Any plans on the Dad House Pod coming back soon?
Yeah, it's really just getting all our schedules together more than anything. Mike's working a lot. I'm working a lot. Mick's actually doing a lot of work. So it's always scheduled when you get that many guys. But and in the meantime, go back through the old episodes. There's a lot of good stuff up there, and we want to keep it up there. And awesome. I think they're going to throw it on YouTube next, just the audio, so you can listen to good stuff while you do stuff. And I think if you want to find me, come find me on any social media platform you're on. I got to run them all. I'm not as active on Twitter anymore because Twitter went nuts. But TikTok and Twitter, Facebook, it's usually Hossman or Hossman53 or something like that. That's a nickname. Or Shannon Carpenter. You'll find me. I also write a column for the Good Men Project every week. And then there's my website, shannoncarpenterauthor.com. So, yeah, come find me. I love to chat. I'll chat with anybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Shannon. I appreciate it. For everyone else, obviously, dads are part of the family situation too. It doesn't matter what background come forward, what kind of dad you are. As Shannon mentioned, it could be trans dad, gay dad.
No one cares.
Single dad. No one cares.
We're
all
dad,
part
man.
of the family here.
That's right.
We're all part of the family. So we're born into our names, but we become family by heart. We'll see you guys next time.